Katie Razzle reporting there. Now, when the history of the internet is written, a significant section will have to be devoted to Jimmy Wales. He's not one of the internet entrepreneurs who made $1 billion at college. He brought us something, though, very revolutionary. Wikipedia, non-profit, crowdsourced, and perhaps the greatest force for the spread of knowledge ever invented. And particularly useful for journalists, incidentally. Well, Jimmy Wales lives in the UK. He's been picking up an award tonight, but not for himself. On behalf of the Saudi blogger Raif Badawi, who was sentenced to 1,000 lashes for, among other things, violating Islamic values and propagating liberal thoughts back in 2012 in Saudi Arabia. Well, Jimmy Wales is with us. And you got involved because you have a foundation for free speech.
Yeah, that's right. I set up a foundation, Jimmy Wales Foundation for Freedom of Expression, and we've joined a coalition of NGOs, human rights groups, who are fighting to free Raif. And so they asked me to come and accept the reward on behalf of the family.
Do you or anyone else actually have much contact with him at the moment?
I don't. The family has very limited contact with him. He's in prison in Saudi Arabia, so it's not that easy.
It's interesting that his case seems to have spawned more interest in these kinds of cases. There's the other one, Mohammed al-Nimr, who says it's just too grotesque, sort of crucifixion for similar offences. It feels as though Saudi Arabia's reached a tipping point, that suddenly in the West there's a lot of questioning going on about the relationship there, more than a year ago or 2 years ago.
Well, definitely. I think that this case has really highlighted for people how bad it really is there. Sometimes people view Saudi Arabia as sort of a calmer and more peaceful place, but internally it's one of the most horrific regimes in terms of repression and violence against people. They've had more than 100 executions this year so far, more, it is said, than ISIS. So we're all horrified about ISIS beheading people, but we should probably be as horrified or more about the Saudis, in no small part because our governments are so complicit.
Well, I was literally going to ask you, I mean, what do you think of the fact, of course, a lot of jobs here, a lot of income here is made by people selling things to Saudi Arabia. And of course, Saudi sells oil to us. You've got to sell them something to pay for it, don't you, in the end?
Yeah, I mean, I think that my view is always it's possible to ratchet up sanctions in a strategic way so that it causes as minimal damage to us as possible and as much damage to them. Some of the things that we've been doing, there's a £15.9 million deal between the UK government to help train the Saudi prison system. That just sounds wrong on every level. There's no excuse for doing something like that. It's not enough money to justify in any way legitimating their practices.
Very briefly, moving on from Saudi, I mean, from freedom of expression there to a very different issue of expression here. There's the Investigatory Powers Bill coming up in Parliament. It looks to be quite controversial, often called the Snoopers Charter.
Yes.
Storing loads of metadata about our internet searches and emails and such like. The British don't seem generally, I think, I might be wrong, I don't think the British seem as worried about that as some other countries. Does it worry you?
It definitely worries me, and I think it's beginning to worry people. I mean, we see a lot of demand in the tech industry from people who are worried about cybersecurity. They really want to see a secure internet. They want encryption everywhere. Some of the ideas the Prime Minister suggested that secure end-to-end encryption should be banned, which means, you know, WhatsApp should be banned. I mean, it's absurd. It's technologically incompetent.
But the head of counter-terrorism has said actually that some of the big internet groups are actually getting in the way of the job of trying to counter terrorism. I mean, you've got to take that seriously, don't you?
You have to take it seriously, but not that seriously. I mean, some of the claims they put forward are just ridiculous. I mean, I think I'm a person who I consider myself fairly reasonable about these kinds of issues, and there are things like making sure that we have judicial sign-off. Making sure
so you'd be
that
happier
we have
with
a process.
If there was all that, you would accept it all?
I won't accept it all, but I would definitely be happier than sort of mass surveillance over everyone, which is incredibly dangerous. And you know, the UK is not about to turn into Saudi Arabia, but you can, if you really want to think about the human rights importance of encryption, I can guarantee you Raif Badawi wishes he had used encryption everywhere and at all the time.
Now, look, we've got 30 seconds to talk about Wikipedia. How is it going? Because I read that the number of volunteers it had had gone down from 55,000 to 30,000. Is it sort of drifting out of fashion in any way at all?
Well, I don't recognize that number, but yes, we did have a decline for a while, and then stability for quite a long time of the core community. And in the last few months, we've had a little nice uptick. So it's something we take seriously, but Wikipedia is not collapsing or anything.
Right, but the volunteers are quite important to making sure it isn't used by professional PR groups and they're not doctoring things.
Absolutely, absolutely. Something that we're very passionate about. We don't want, no one in the community wants Wikipedia to be sort of abandoned to the shills. So we've got a lot of work to do.
Jimmy Wales, thanks very much for coming in.
Very good, thanks.
Well, that's almost it for tonight.